So welcome. Today on Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero, I'd like to welcome Ilene Skeen, who is the author of a book called Liftoff, which is a book designed really for late teens and teenagers to have a great end of their teenage years and build into becoming a great young adult, someone who is powerful, so that they can create a life that they really love. And I came across this book. Eileen's just in the process of publishing it. Congratulations. Right. And the thing that I really found fascinating about it is that Eileen comes from a heavily objectivist Ayn Rand background, but her book isn't about that. It's about the skills that come when you apply Ayn Rand's work to your life. And so it's really a practical book about how you can learn to consciously use your mind and think like an Ayn Rand hero, in my words, right? To actually create a great life, a life that you can't wait to wake up to. And I thought it would be really fun to have her on the show. So welcome, Eileen.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that very interesting and accurate introduction.
Oh, yes, we're starting off well. Great. Well, so one of the questions I like to ask is, how did you come across Ayn Rand? Right? How did you get into her work? I know you read Atlas Shrugged when you were 19, but how did that come about? What happened? What's your story of encountering Ayn Rand?
How to make a long story interesting and short. The long and the short of it is, I had spent a summer away when I was 19, and I was in college, but I had spent the summer away in art school. I'd come back in September of 1966 and was looking for something to read. And I asked my father, and he said, just a minute, came back with Atlas Shrugged, which had been checked out of the New York Public Library probably years before. He didn't check it out, but it had never been returned. And he said, here's a book by a crazy Russian lady you might enjoy. And I had read Fountainhead while I was away during the summer. And I thought it was a good book, but really had nothing to do with me. I didn't internalize it. I enjoyed the story. I understood the difference between the villains and the good guys. I didn't understand the rape. There were all kinds of issues that I had. But he said, and I looked at it, Ayn Rand, and I didn't know how to say it. It's a lady, I didn't know it was a woman. She was a woman and everything. But I opened the book, and I started to read, and something happened. I read where Eddie Willers watches the bus turn the corner, expertly steered, and he feels better about it. And I said, what's going on? Why is she telling me this? And for some reason, I got the idea that every single word in that book was going to mean something. And I just went back and I started over. And I'm a very fast reader, very, very fast. It took me a month to read Atlas Shrugged the first time. But I'm a person who can read a big book like that generally in a few days. And the whole month was like, what does this mean? Why is this happening to this character? Why does Dagny have a gray coat and it's battered? And why is Jim Taggart, looking up like this from his eye, with his eyes? And why are these characters doing that? What does it mean to the story? Why are they like that? And then somewhere towards the middle, I started to say, wow, what does this mean to my life? Is this true? Is this really true? Well, if this is true, then the next thing was true. And then even later on, I said, what does this mean to the world? It's like, oh my God. And then suddenly he says, A is A. And it was like a bank vault opening, swinging open, and stepping through the other side, I was free. And I was a different person. My handwriting changed so much that my mother had to go to the bank to sign for me because they wouldn't let me take out $15 from my account. I was a kid.
So how did I have my own version of that story, as most of us do.
Right.
Right. That there's a point where we go, oh my gosh, this is
it. This is it. This is what I've been looking for.
This is speaking the truth in a way that is so recognizable.
Right.
That it's putting words on things that I hadn't quite articulated.
Right.
And
exactly.
And from that point, everything was different. I so beautiful. Beautiful. How did that change your handwriting?
It got, and this was before I saw a picture of Ayn Rand's handwriting, but it got more vertical, and gone was the loopy eye and the.
It became more precise,
it became more straight up and down. It became less curvy. It was a different person. It was a person who knew what they were doing.
Yes. You know, we love Ayn Rand. Mm-hmm. We love what she has given to us.
Yes.
We love the worlds that she's created. It's just clear we're on the same we're on the same wavelength about this.
Yeah.
And that, right, you became a person who knew what she was doing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There was a purpose.
And when I got lost in the next, how many years, 50 years since I read it, not too often, and especially not later, but early on, it always answered me if I said, what would Dagny do? Then I knew. So she was my absolute hero, and she was my hero because she could run a railroad, she could do business, she could do something hard and mental, but she was always dressed to the nines and wearing the things that I would love to have and being proud of wearing them and knowing that she was a woman. And, some of this, it was just the most perfect heroine ever imagined, as far as I'm concerned. There wasn't anything that Dagny could have done better. So when she did The Ideal Man, and I noticed years later, or not too much later, but a lot of men identify with Reardon, or identify with Francisco, or identify with Howard Roark. But John Galt is very remote to most men. But Dagny is so female and so woman and so easy and hard for a man to identify with a woman that's that much woman. So so I felt like I noticed that, and I thought, oh well, I'm very lucky because Dagny, you see Dagny every inch of the way through all her trials and tribulations, and it's very easy to say, yeah, this is what Dagny would do.
That's that. You bring up something as a woman, right? To have such a strong female character.
Yes.
When I look through literature, I don't really see that. I mean.
Yeah, that's right. You don't see it.
And
You don't
So,
see it.
what was it like as a woman for you to have this heroine?
It was liberating because back then in the 60s and early 70s, there were still places that had, uh, they didn't have glass ceilings. Maybe they had lead ceilings. You couldn't see to move up. It was there was so much nepotism, and there's so much, women did this, and and some really not nice things were going on. But it made me strong because I knew I was right. And if people were not paying attention to my mind and had this other idea of what women's capability was, it was on them and not on me. And I just it made me, it didn't discourage me. It just made me say, this is not the place, move on. And there were several times when I had to move on, even though I was in, sort of situations where if I hadn't had that strength, I might have said, "Oh, I'm too afraid to move," or but it's just like, no, you have to do this
Mm-hmm.
because it's not going to work any other way.
Yeah, Dagny wouldn't. Dag-
Right,
Dagny
right.
wouldn't do that.
So I was a hard ass in the business world,
Yes.
and I didn't suffer fools gladly, and so I enjoyed it though.
Uh-huh.
So it was all right.
Well, it sounds one of my favorite lines concepts in Atlas Shrugged
Yeah.
is Dagny saying, "I earned it." Right?
Yes.
She was talking
Yes.
about Hank and
Yes.
but that's like if I summarize Dagny, right? It comes down to that phrase. It's "I earned it." And
Hmm.
what I'm hearing and what you're saying is just there's an unshakable confidence. You know who you are.
That's right.
Right. And
That's
I
right.
just love if anybody else doesn't see it and if they've got some filter that has them not treat you according to what you're actually bringing
Hmm.
with the one thing that is cross gender, which is your mind, your ability
Right.
to
That's right.
understand and contribute real value to a situation. If they don't see that, it's like, okay, this is not a place for me.
That's right.
And you had an
Hmm.
example of, okay, like, nobody messes with Dagny except James.
Right. Right.
Right?
Right.
Right?
That's right. And that was, yeah. It served me well.
Mm-hmm.
It served me very
Oh,
well.
well, so one more question down there because it's such a hot topic. I know in the
Right.
conversations I'm having in terms of what's going on in our culture,
Yes.
there's been this significant shift in feminism from equity feminism, which is look, let's treat people the same in terms of legality and give them treat them as if
Right.
they are human beings,
Hmm.
right, and allow their
Hmm.
talents to sort them
Right.
versus no, we have to do special treatment for women and we have to change the rules when we're dealing with. What is your particular take on feminism and how that's gone? Do you have any thoughts on that? You may or may not.
Oh, just about every justified evil that a hero, such as Martin Luther King, has tried to fix, because there was a lot of discrimination at the time, has been perverted by the progressives into something far beyond what the original thrust of restoring justice to the universe was. If you listen to Martin Luther King's speech, you don't see a rabid, kill all the whites, prevent people from entering, saying their opinions. You don't see somebody saying, if you disagree with me, you're a racist. You don't, none of that. Abortion is another issue. That a woman has control of her body is right. The baby's not, it's a fetus, it's not a baby. That the state has a right to force doctors or to force health insurance companies or to force hospitals to make this available is absolutely wrong. That a woman could demand an abortion from somebody who doesn't want to do it in a hospital that doesn't want to have that procedure, it is unconscionable. If you're a baker and you don't want to bake a cake for a homosexual who tells you they want this homosexual message on the cake, they could have gone elsewhere. They could have gotten a cake and put their own. No, it was just.
We all know they looked for a baker that would not do it, so that they could make the case.
$130,000 fine. Those people are out of business. So that's
and that's different than you could say the kind of feminism that I can imagine that you were back, right? That you did you call yourself a feminist? Was that ever something, a label that you chose? And then we'll drop.
Thought yes. At first I thought it was going to be a good thing, but when Ayn Rand said no, it's gender. Basically, she said gender identity is meaningless. And of course, you have to agree. When you think of it that way, that's like the least of it. Except, as a woman, and I'm reading about Dagny, I identify with her, but it's her mind in her body, and her mind it's like when Reardon sees Dagny for the first time, and he knows that he wants to possess her, not only because she's a woman and she's beautiful, but because she's the woman that runs the railroad. That's what makes it for him. So those metaphors, those presentations are so meaningful. If you can't respond to that, if those things are not in your universe, you cannot ever understand Ayn Rand. In other words, Ayn Rand builds, people say, she has this gold speech, and it's, the book, you can read everything else, but gold speech is horrible and blah, blah, blah. But the people who complain, they don't get the perceptual data either. They can't see reality the way she's dishing out these wonderful tidbits of images. Like, my favorite is when Dagny has crashed the plane, opened her eyes, and says, "We never had to take it seriously." And he says, "No." And then she realizes she has no idea who this guy is. So it's like so inventive. If you can't respond to that on the perceptual level, on the emotional level, you won't get Atlas Shrugged. You won't get it. You can intellectualize it, and there's a lot of people who intellectualize it. But unless it touches them deep inside, so that they really understand what she means when she says, my philosophy is an integration from the perceptual level up, and I can connect every concept to bedrock reality. That's what Atlas Shrugged does for you, because you see that vision of a world that's so real, so much more livable than the one we have. So that's the image that sustained me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's beautiful. Your love for her world is palpable. It's palpable, right? And you've taken that,
Yes.
right? And the one of the things that where I connected with you, right? Just
Yeah.
immediately read a few paragraphs of one another, and it was
Right.
like, okay, we're on the same page.
Right.
Is that is a philosophy to be lived, right?
Yes.
That is a way of approaching life that you can
That's right.
systematically turn into a way of life, not a way of
Right.
thinking per se. You can intellectualize it, and it's
Right.
fascinating on a philosophical perspective from epistemology and
Right.
ethics and politics,
Right.
and even, but it's how you live.
Right.
It's
That's right.
bringing the intellectual down into the perceptual,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Where you and I, where I found such resonance with you immediately,
Right. Exactly.
right? And so you've taken this way of life.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that we could talk for hours, and
I think
everywhere that I
so.
went with you, that you would say, okay, so here's how it applies. Here's how
Right.
in my life it has impacted me,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which is, again, this is why we love Ayn Rand. This is why
Right.
we love it.
Right.
But you've translated it into a popular book that doesn't talk about Ayn Rand. It's not a book on
That's right.
Ayn Rand. It's a book on, okay, so put all of the fact that it's Ayn Rand off to the side.
Right.
How do you actually apply it? And not here are her ideas and how do you apply it, but let's
Right.
actually start from the lived experience. You are confronted with your life. What do
Right.
you want? And how do you translate that into practical action so that you can get better and better and better and become powerful at
Right.
achieving it?
Right. Right. Well,
How yeah,
in order for me to explain that, I have to explain the goal of the book.
please.
Okay. Um, for many years, I've been thinking about this book, and I've been thinking that the schools are getting worse and worse. What we need is something that would get more kids thinking for themselves. Even if they never become objectivists, if they become plumbers or reporters or whatever they do, if they could think through something for themselves, we'd be better off. But you can't just tell somebody, you have to think for yourself. This is how you do it. You know, you have to give them a problem, but you can't give them your problem. You have to get them to take their problem and figure out how to solve it. And I said, I have the philosophy and it's all grounded, right? But unless unless the kid feels that he, and I mean by he, I mean he or she, can solve the problem, can get the job done, there's no point, and they're going to give up before they start. So you have to start with them thinking about something particular. So
Their
they
goals, what they want.
are, because the culture is nihilistic. So it's teaching them the negatives. They know what they don't want. They know what they can't do. They've been told they can't think. They've been told that they're not good enough. They've been told that this, like that. So there are thousands and thousands of self-help books. And all of them tout positive thinking. So if you're thinking negative, you got to think positive. So if you think you're average, you got to think awesome. And if you're a kid and you could like build yourself up. That will last until you're 40 or so. And unless you've made it big by that time, you're going to have a midlife crisis and say, you know, it really wasn't awesome. You know, how did that work? And you know, and what I wanted to do was give the person a solid ground to go forward on. So that's what my son did at one point. So this is all wrapped up. It's all connected. But one time I had a crisis at work, and I had so many in the story. The story of it was I had so many conflicting jobs and priorities, and I had 25 people working for me, and a user community of about 400 people, and it was just a nightmare. And I was ready to jump out the window. You don't tell your 18-year-old son you're ready to jump out the window, especially if you're a single mom. It's like, you know, that's like really not fair. And he said, Mom, you have it all wrong. And then he explained this step 1, step 2, step 3, and it changed my life. He says, you can't. I said, I have so many jobs. I don't know which to do first. You know, you can't do. He says, look, you can only do job 1. Job 1. I must have 45 job 1s. No, you don't. Job 1 is the job you can do. That's the only job you have. Do job 1. That's the job that's been set up. It's ready to go. You know what to do. It's waiting for you to do it. There's no reason not to do it. That's the job you got to do. Just do it. It was like, wait a minute. It was like a train came in and went out of the station, and I didn't even see it. I couldn't grasp it. And then, but the second one that was the unusual one. He says, so you get job 1, you know what it is, you do it, it's a job you can do, you do it, done, finish. Put it on your list of accomplishments. Okay. He says, now you have job 2. Job 2, you thought about it, you set it up, it's all ready to go, but you don't do it. Why? You know, it's like, why? So you put it aside. All right. He says, now job 3 comes in. You think about it. You think about it, how you would set it up if you were going to set it up. But you don't have time to set it up. You just think about it. All right. Is anything ever going to get done? That's what I'm thinking. It's like you did one job and you're sitting here thinking about not doing anything. He says, and then you get job 4. And when job 4 comes in, your plate's full because you got job 2. So job 2 becomes job 1 and you do it. And job 3, you set it up because now you've thought about how to set it up, so you know what to do. So that becomes job 2. And now you can think about job 4, which is the new job 3. And it was like, oh. And it made so much sense. I just like, wow. And the next day I went into work and I said, this is what we're going to do. And of course, everybody was very skeptical. And they said, that won't work. Every job is different. And I said, yeah, but you're the same. And you can only do what you can do. So the whole, sorry.
Yeah, well, no. So fantastic. And in the book, you actually take what you just said and you operationalize it into a set of steps that you can apply.
That's right.
And I wanna highlight the thing that you just said, which you also led up to it very well in the book. It was a memorable moment where it's like, right, all the jobs are different, but you are the same, right?
That's right.
And this is the human being. This is right. In that moment, it for me in the book, it's like, that ties together with this world of Ayn Rand because it's we are the rational animal.
That's
And
right.
our rationality
That's
is
right.
common.
That's
We
right.
are human beings. There are things that we need as human beings. There are things that represent the fulfillment of our possibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because we bring our rational intelligence to every job that we're doing, every task, every project,
Right.
our goals,
Mm-hmm.
we are the common element. And this methodology, this practice, right, it's a very specific way of applying your thinking to a
Right.
project to take, what could be an innumerable, infinite number of things to do and to translate it into an order, a sequence that you can apply over and over and over. And the better you get at it, the better you get at it.
That's right. That's right. And I had all kinds of complaints. It's like there's you always have more than one, you always have more than three jobs. I said, well, there's job one, job two, job three. Job four is the one that's coming in, so you got to do job one. So you can, if it's really important, then you got to do job one because it's already, so you have room on your plate. They say, well, what about job five? I said,
It's all
job five is a don't even think about it.
it's
You
all job
can't do it.
if it's
The whole rest of the world is job five, not your problem.
yes. Yes.
And it really the group I have to tell you the terminology is the the terminology of job one like that, the terminology is infectious because one of the people that I've been telling this to and working with, she says, I work with a whole bunch of kids at Burger King and Jack in the Box and this, and they're all talking about what's job one. I'm going to do job one now. And that's exactly what I wanted because in the real world, job one is a specific thing that you know what it is. It's not like, oh, I want to feel good about this, or I want to be a nice person. It's like, what are you going to do? So, okay, I want to be a nice person. How do I show somebody that I'm a nice person? I could write them a note. I could call them up. So you're going to do something. So that's the job, not being a nice person. That there's no content there. So when you get a person taking negatives like, oh, I have a bad posture, I'm too fat, I weigh this way. The negatives are always very specific and the positives are always very vague. So you take the negative, that's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
Make it a positive and then make it a specific thing that you can accomplish. Then when you accomplish it, you've done something. You've connected your wish and your intention with reality and made a change. This is a big deal. If you're a kid, 9 times out of 10, maybe 9 out of 100, you have no idea what you're going to do with your life. If you look at other self-help books, they're either going to tell you, find your purpose and then you'll be fine, or find God and then you'll be fine. And unlike everything else, and even the people who teach about self-help books, they teach it. I don't have my. Just a minute. I just want to look because I took a note on this because this is very, very much why it works.
That's good. As you're looking for it, your process is building from the ground up. You're building on successes. You do job one. First of all, you recognize that the only thing there is to do is job one. And
Right.
that simplifies things so that you can actually do it. And then you teach people how to shift their negatives, to recognize the nihilistic culture, the negatives, and translate that into what they want and then into job one. Then they do it. Now they've done it.
Right.
Right? Now they know that they can do it. They have
And they
proven the
pick the
fundamental
next.
principle, which is
Yes.
I can take a negative, which most of our culture is negative, and you go through and,
It's
beautifully go through and
endless.
just say, oh my gosh, look at all these negative things that people are taught. Okay, so we shift that into a positive, but it's not like a false positive. Oh, you're ordinary, be extraordinary, or right,
Exactly.
you're
Exactly.
mediocre, be awesome. No, no.
Right. Yeah. Where
What
is
you're
that going to
mediocre?
come
No,
from?
no. You can be good. How are you going to be good? What do you want to be good at? Let's translate it into job one and then do it. And now I
That's right.
know I
Exactly.
can decide what I want, turn it into an action, complete the action, and move forward. Now I've got
Right.
something I can build with. Okay,
Right.
so you may
Yes.
have found what you want to find, but
Yes. And the way this guy introduced it was story, struggle, solution, and system. Okay? Story, and he's telling about this is how a self help book works: story, struggle, solution, and system. And I'm taking notes, and it's like,
pulling your hair
oh,
out.
this is the problem. Because you have to start with the system, and it has to be their story, their struggle, and their solution if they're going to internalize it. If you're going to start with your story, your struggle, and yours, they're going to learn about you, but they're not going to learn about them. And unless they learn about them, they're not going to be able to do
And so you
this.
need to teach them the system
That's right.
that allows them to figure out what is job one and do it. Right?
That's
That
right.
way
That's
they
right.
confront their story,
Their story,
they
their
confront their
problems.
struggle,
It's
and they
their,
come up with a solution using a system. If you bring the
yeah,
system to it,
yeah,
then that's the thing that's you. That's the thing
yeah.
that you can bring
That's
to any story,
that's
to
right,
any
and
struggle, to
that's
create
right. It's the
solutions.
method, the system. It's what you have to do, and it's. Sometimes I catch myself. I would say, "Wait a minute, I have to think. What is job one now?" Because sometimes this happens to the best of us. And as I was writing the book, I realized that I had the system worked out for me, but unless I did it in the way where you start with the, the story and the struggle, and you start with the system of converting it from the negative to the positive and all that, but with their own problems, I would tell a story, but it would be, that's a nice story, but has nothing to do with my life. So I wanted to make it so, yes, and I have some really strong language. It's like, okay, if you don't want to do the worksheets, you don't have to do them. You're going to learn about my thinking, but you're not going to learn about your thinking. If you want to solve your problems, you have to learn about your thinking, stuff like that. So that was a big breakthrough to make that whole thing really capture the kid. And the book is the kind of book that I think people will read and reread because it's in three
Three
sections.
sections.
The first one is all the worksheets, and you get the method and practicing the method. So that's like the kid alone, just learning like a new way of looking at the world, of training yourself to think about what can I do? I don't like this, so it's happening. What are the alternatives that I can do, and which one makes the most sense? And that's not to say that everybody is going to do the same thing, because different people have different skills, different bents, different talents, um, different approaches to life. So where one person that's lost would go and ask a teacher, another person would go and look it up in the dictionary. Things. People don't have to do the same things, but they do have to know how to solve their own problems.
And
Then the second part of the book is about the teen and the culture, the negativity of our culture. And I have a quip in there. It's like, okay, this whole section could be called How to Understand the Broken System and Keep It from Ruining Your Life. Because as you said, I go through all the fallacies, I go through all the things, and I say, you don't really have to remember all of this. But what you'll notice is every single error starts with negativity, and it's all nihilism. It's all the result of nihilism. So they don't have to grow up to be philosophers, to be, it's like reject nihilism and say, no, doesn't work for me, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you introduce them, and we'll get on to the third part in just a moment. So you go through and you acquaint them to recognize what are these negative patterns that are easy to recognize. You name them, right?
Yes.
Right, and you go through. Ayn Rand was, what is your philosophy on one foot? She said metaphysics, objective reality.
Right.
Right. Epistemology, reason.
Right.
Ethics, rational self-interest, politics, laissez-faire capitalism, and aesthetics, romantic realism. You could say these five things. And in a sense, you go through and you say, first, like, what's your reality? What is your reality? What are the actual story that you're in? What's the struggle you're in? And then how do you bring reason to it?
Right.
And here are all the ways that it goes wrong, including, like, here's how people teach you not to take responsibility. How they teach you how you're not supposed to live your own life.
Right.
Right? And how, and you go into a thing on entitlements. Right? You don't pull any punches. You literally go through and say, look, here's what the culture is teaching you, right? Whereas Ayn Rand might go through and say, okay, so here's altruism and here's these various things.
Right.
You just, how is this concrete in your life? How is this showing up so that you can learn to recognize it? And wherever you find one of these things, here's the process, right? Take that, move it through. And one of the things I wrote when I was going through and making notes on it is that the negative thinking disempowers you. It disconnects you from the thing of saying, okay, what am I going to do in my life? How am I going to take responsibility to use reason in reality? Right? How am I going to do that? But positive thinking, each one of these negative pieces, there's a positive solution.
Well, there may be more than one, and that's the negative can be specific or general. The positive, first statement of the positive is almost always general because you're afraid to be specific. So in the book, I have a sample where the kid, as an example, my little kid Brian, he wants to learn to drive. That's, he knows he can't drive. That's his thing. It's like, I want to learn to drive. I want to drive. But you can't just do a want to drive. There's steps. You've got to take a test. You've got to practice. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. So all the steps to counter that negative. And so he's got this positive, I want to drive. Well, what am I going to do? He's read in the book, he's read the online thing about the rules of the road for his state. So he's ready to take a test. So, I could take the test and then I would get my permit because I'm old enough. So he has to speak to his dad to get, to do that. And then the other thing is now he's got to figure out who he's going to be able to practice with, or is he going to take it in school? Whatever it is that he's going to do to learn to drive, now he's set himself up. So it's more than one step. You don't suddenly go from non-driver to driver. So a mature person has a goal and goes forward and does it piece by piece. And I have also an important thing on practical life, where you're a teen. When you were young, your parents, bathed you and fed you, and you learned how to feed yourself and wash yourself. But did you learn to do your own clothes? Did you learn to cook a meal? Did you learn to clean up after yourself? Does your room look like a hurricane? Or do you keep these kinds of things are what adults do without complaining. You want to be an adult? Grow up.
Yes, and as you put it in the book in a number of places, like put on your
Your
big
big,
boy pants or your big girl
yeah,
pants, right?
big kid pants.
Yeah,
I love that. I mean, and that's a friend. That happened. That that was that was a woman I met in September uh, when I just before I started writing the book, and she's in her
it,
70s, and that's
it's
what
just
she says.
and it's just so right. And it goes against the whole nihilist culture, right? Because to say, look, deal, be an adult. The world is not going to give it to you. It's not the world's job to give it to you, right? You get to create it. So suck it up, learn what you need to learn. You can do this. Just do it.
Well,
You can focus on the negative. You can complain. You can get so good at complaining, right?
right.
The culture teaches you how to complain, and everyone just, oh, here's what's wrong. People are
Hmm.
so good at critiquing and finding fault, and what does that get you? It gets you nothing. It gets you a complained world in which you have no power.
Right.
Now you have to try
Right.
to petition other people to do things for you in order to get what you want. Is that
Right.
really? No.
Right.
Put on your big girl pants. Put on your big boy pants.
Exactly.
Right. And just handle it. Like, just recognize where are the negatives and then say, what do you want? And then first thing you do in what you want is going to tend to be general. It's
Right.
not going to be concrete. It's going to be
Right.
abstract, right? Okay, so now, great, you've got that. Now we have a tool to take that and bring it down into step by step,
Hmm.
concrete steps that you can do
Hmm.
because it's job one.
And I'd like to mention here one thing that I've noticed, because I went to a book, like an independent book publishing
Mm-hmm.
place, to sort of get my act together. I had
Mm-hmm.
a coach and I had a buddy,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of people, all ages, but most of them young, working on this same subject, but without a philosophy.
No system.
Okay? No system, no philosophy. So here's what I noticed. These, especially the young people, they sincerely believe that they're going to help people by giving the people things. In other words, they support, they have bought into the entitlement state, hook, line, and sinker. Okay? People need this, so we have to give it to them. People need that, so we have to give it to them. There are poor people in Peru, and there are poor people in Haiti, and there are poor people, and there are poor people in the Bronx. So they all need these things, and anybody who doesn't give these things to them is really an evil Fu Manchu or something. And what I wanted to show in this book is when you take your negatives and turn them to positives and then accomplish a task, you've earned that pride that you feel that drives your life to go forward in the next task. And when you, in your innocence, take what you've earned and give what you've earned to somebody else just for no reason, because he needs it, you have robbed that person of ever feeling what you felt about yourself, of him feeling about himself. In other words, entitlement is the robbery of empowerment. And you got that, I noticed when you wrote to me, that, if you are in favor of self-empowerment, it has to be self-empowerment for everyone. And you have to make it so that everybody feels, I can do it. I can do it. When you have a business and your customers pay you, and you take parts of your profit and give it away to people who need it, to the detriment of, number one, your customers, to whom you could have charged less. Number two, yourself, because you're taking something and you're just frittering it away. But more important than any of that is that if you had taken that same amount of money and plowed it back into your business, you would be able to charge less. Your old customers would get a break. You would have many more new customers, and every dime that you collected for supplying this service of whatever it is you're supplying would empower you to empower these people and more. When John D. Rockefeller started, I think oil was like $25 a barrel, something like that. By the time he owned 95%, 97% of oil, all the resources in oil, in the oil business, it was like 7 cents. It was next to nothing. And he kept it next to nothing because he wanted to, he empowered people, right?
He brought them kerosene. He brought them light. And in the process, he became immensely wealthy because he could offer at a lower price a better product, because his thing was standard oil, right? Oil was problematic, and when your kerosene lamp blows up, your house burns down. It's a problem. So he made a better product, a standardized product, a safer product for less money than any of the competitors.
But his competition came out of left field, and he lost that business anyway, because Edison made the electric light bulb, didn't need oil at all in the house. So it's like so Edison took it once and took it from 7 cents to practically nothing for an installation. And all of the people who are empowered were taught to complain. Yes. Those who had nothing but tallow
and if Rockefeller had not done that, if Edison had not done that, if they had said, oh, okay, so I've made a little money, so now I'm going to give it away, rather than investing it back in to take it from,
Exactly.
Right, okay, so I've reduced the cost of kerosene by 50%. Okay, I'm going to stop now, and now I'm going to give it away. Versus going, no, now I'm going to reduce it another 50%.
Right.
And then another 50%, and another 50%.
Yeah.
Right. Business is fundamentally a win-win transaction.
Exactly.
And so the more you do business, the more everyone wins, and everyone who participates earns it.
Yes.
Earns it. And that gives you a sense of satisfaction, a sense of pride.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like what you were recognizing when you were writing the book is that this sense of pride is something that, without a system that generates that pride, without a system that generates you being responsible to use reason in reality, if your system doesn't have you do it, then you don't get the pride.
Exactly. What I think from the point of view of I'm agreeing with you. From the point of view of Ayn Rand's philosophy, and her calling it a moral crisis, which it is. There's no doubt that it's a moral crisis, that altruism is an evil morality, which is
the
horrible.
self-sacrificial
Yeah,
version of
right?
altruism, the technical version of altruism. Yes.
Right. But there's two insights that we have to pay attention with this. Number one, if we're fighting a war against altruism with objectivism, virtue of selfishness, all the books, but we're not winning. There's evidence that we're growing, but there's no evidence yet that we're growing fast enough to win this war. I think you'd agree with me. I mean,
yes.
Right? There's evidence that people keep saying, "Are we going to run out of time?" So that's what I'm seeing. So I took a thought from John Lewis's book, Nothing Less Than Victory, which I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't. It's excellent.
Excellent. Because in that book, you will learn what it means to name the enemy. Over 6 wars fought from the Greeks on to World War II. And it
sounds
you
great.
Can't, it's in order to, he says, in order to vanquish the enemy, you must find the source of his moral strength. Now, altruism itself is irrational, right? We know this. But it's 2,000 years old, so at least more like 2,500, because it really comes in about 500 years BC out of northern Greece, Thrace, with the soul-body dichotomy. That's where it came from, and it was sort of like there, but it became more prevalent at that time.
They became able to name it, and it became its own force. Rather than a subtext, it became a clear central text.
Right, but the thing is, what has kept this going for so long? And when you deal with causes, a thing can't cause itself. It's always caused by some characteristic or some other thing, something within it. So what are the pillars of altruism? Well, the pillars of any morality are metaphysics and epistemology. Now, we know altruism has a metaphysics of either nihilism or a mystical being. So that is basically the metaphysics that consciousness is primary, or consciousness is a duality with objective reality, or objective reality doesn't exist at all. So those are the 3 choices, and your different flavors of altruists pick different ones, but they all agree altruism is the only philosophy. So that is a consistent thing, that the metaphysics, altruism depends on an irrational metaphysics, a metaphysics which is non-functioning. But as long as we're fighting the battle on altruism without understanding that the foundation is metaphysics, and we have to attack the foundation, we're not going to win. And the same thing with epistemology, because in epistemology, you have logic, but there's no logic in altruism. There's only contradictions. So it's the holding contradictions in your mind.
As John Galt says, why is it moral for you to have a cake but not for me. If I make a cake, give it to you. If I keep the cake and I'm selfish, aren't you selfish if you take it? Right? That's the contradiction at the heart of it.
Right, but you don't understand, they say. How can you say that,
Yes.
So
And so they have to deny reason, because reason tears apart their system. They just like they deny metaphysics. Well, the reality isn't that way. Yes.
Right. So I have a lot in the book about taking you through reality and how the words don't really mean. You're supposed to, buy the words and buy the meaning without looking at anything too closely. But if you got from the first level that you can only make progress when you look at things closely, now you're starting to say, well, wait a minute. There's something to this. There's something going on that I should look at this more closely. So the book is designed, and I hope it works, to make more people Ayn Rand ready, to make more people able to appreciate Ayn Rand when they read her. That's my whole dream.
Absolutely. And to summarize, it's to focus on reality, the reality of your life, to use reason, take responsibility, right? And then act to make things happen.
Right.
Right. And you give a process for that. You have people recognize the negatives, and you have them get down to the fundamentals, right? Let's look at reality. Let's look at reason. This is the tool
for your life.
For your life.
And I even say, I don't know what you're going to write. That's between you and the page, kind of a thing. So and I've had teachers who want to teach this, but I'm sort of, I don't know how. Some of them would do it rationally. Some of them, I'm afraid, would do it evilly.
It's the trick of the whole thing. It's like the better you get at the system, the easier it is to apply the system, the easier it is to teach other people.
Right.
Right.
But
so I will say for your book that if you just read it and you follow the instructions, you guide people down to the fundamentals.
Right.
Right. And so that they could take action. And so I will thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And again, I'll bring it back to the idea that we said at the beginning around Dagny. I earned it. Right? She focused on reality and used reason and took responsibility, and there was no question about it. She didn't get lost in the negatives. She just focused on what she wanted to do and what were the steps necessary to make it happen. Right. And that's why we love her. That's why she inspires us. So thank you for your book, because it gets to the core issues, both in terms of where the challenges are and how you can move it forward.
That's right.
Right. And to say, and to be able to say, I earned it. To have the system that you can apply again and again and get better and better, a system that, focuses on reality and applies reason and takes responsibility. So I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank you for the conversation. And what's the site that people should go to? I'm going to put it in the show notes, but so people who are listening, what site should they get? Should they buy it on Amazon, or where should they buy it?
Yes, it's on Amazon. It's on Liftoff. It's in Kindle now, and I'm working on the paperback, which should be out. I'm hoping to bring it to Ocon because
Yes.
But I think I can make it happen. So
Great. Well, so pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
I wish you all good things, as we say, in the name of the best within us. And I look forward to how we interact in the future.
That would be wonderful.
We're certainly on the same team. We'll find a way to play.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. Good night.